People didn't expect a woman to be interrogated for kindness, especially not in the middle of a mall with a crying child at her side and dozens of eyes watching like she'd done something wrong. But that's exactly what happened. And if you'd been walking through Havenwalk Mall that afternoon, with the scent of cinnamon buns in the air and the echo of sneakers squeaking over polished tile, you might have seen her two standing beside the bench near the central fountain, her hands calm, her eyes steady as a security guard questioned her like she was a thief. It all began about 20 minutes earlier. The glass doors of Marlowe Books glided shut behind Elena as she stepped into the Saturday buzz of Havenwalk, a sprawling indoor mall in the heart of Langford City. Sunlight filtered through the high skylights above, catching the glimmer of glass, storefronts and bouncing off polished marble floors. A guitarist played near the entrance of the food court, his tune weaving gently through the hum of conversation and the occasional screech of a toddler. Elena didn't walk like most of the shoppers who darted between stores with chaotic energy and bags bouncing at their sides. She moved with elegant restraint, unhurried, present. In her left hand, she carried a small paper parcel, a signed novel she'd been waiting months to buy. Her right hand adjusted the strap of her chestnut brown crossbody bag. Her hair, a rich crown of tight curls, was pulled into a puff at the top of her head, gold hoop earrings catching the light when she turned. She wore a moss-green trench coat that swayed just slightly with her stride, crisp beige trousers, and ankle boots polished enough to reflect the ceiling lights. There was no urgency in her pace. Elena had come to rest. A hot drink, a quiet seat by the windows upstairs, and maybe 30 minutes of peace. That was all she wanted. But fate doesn't ask. As she rounded the corner past a row of smoothie kiosks, her eyes caught something out of place. Something small, still, scared. A little boy, maybe 5 or 6, stood near a trash bin at the edge of the food court. His jacket was half-zipped, his cheeks stained with dried tears. In one hand, he clutched a small blue dinosaur plush, the other hovered by his mouth, thumb trembling against his lip. He didn't move, didn't speak. And no adult was with him. Elena stopped mid-step. She scanned the crowd, parents with strollers, teenagers with phones, a woman laughing into a coffee cup, no one looking around, no one searching for a child. This boy was alone. She approached him slowly, like you'd approach a startled bird. Her voice came soft, careful. "Hey there," she said, crouching to his eye level. "You okay? Are you lost?" The boy blinked. His eyes were watery, rimmed red. He didn't answer. "That's okay," she said gently. "You don't have to talk if you're scared. My name's Elena. What's yours?" For a moment, he just stared. Then, in the tiniest whisper, he said, "Mason." "Hi, Mason," she said with a reassuring smile. "That's a brave name. Is your mom or dad here with you?" He shook his head. Elena's stomach clenched. She looked again. No one seemed concerned. People passed the boy like he wasn't even there. "Would you like some water?" she asked. From her bag, she pulled out a half-full bottle. Mason hesitated, then nodded once. She unscrewed the cap and offered it. He took it in both hands like it was something precious. "We'll find them, sweetheart, I promise." She reached for her phone as she stood and scanned the area once more. A family with matching hats was ordering pretzels. A girl in roller sneakers zipped past. Nothing. No one claiming Mason. Elena gently guided him to a nearby bench beneath a tall indoor tree. The leaves shimmered with a slight draft from the ceiling vents. She kept her posture open, angled toward Mason, but not hovering. Everything in her body said, "You're safe now. I'm calling mall security. They'll help us. But I'm not going anywhere until your parents come." Mason leaned against her side. Not entirely, just enough to know he was anchoring himself to her presence. The mall moved around them, families laughed, announcements played, shoes squeaked, but to Elena, the world had narrowed. There was only this little boy and the promise she had just made. 7 minutes passed. She knew because she checked her phone again. In that time, she had flagged down a barista from the nearby cafe to keep an eye out in case someone came looking for a child. Still, no parent. Still, no name called through the intercom. Still alone. She didn't let her mind run wild, though pieces of fear knocked at the edge of her thoughts. Instead, she asked Mason about his dinosaur. "What's his name?" "Rocket." He mumbled, "Rocket's a good name." "Where were you and your dad before?" He hesitated. "Big toy store." Then he was on the phone. It wasn't much, but it told Elena one thing. He hadn't just wandered far. He had been lost. She didn't hear the stroller until it was nearly beside her. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice. A woman stood there, one brow arched, ponytail pulled tight. "Is he yours?" Elena looked up. There was no warmth in the question. It wasn't concern. It was suspicion wrapped in civility. "No," Elena replied, voice firm but even. "He was alone. I stayed with him and called security." The woman's gaze flicked to Mason's small hand, which was still touching Elena's sleeve. Her face barely concealed what she thought of that. "Well, just checking," the woman muttered before turning the stroller and pushing away. Though she cast one more look over her shoulder, Elena exhaled slowly. That look, she knew it well. She had seen it in grocery stores, parking lots, even at family picnics. Being a black woman near a crying child could twist strangers' assumptions into cruel shapes. She brushed imaginary lint from her coat. Mason was what mattered. Moments later, a woman from the boutique across the walkway leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes locked. No words, just that silent stare. It wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. Elena kept her head high, her voice calm whenever she spoke. Mason had finished half the water and was now quieter. But the tension in the air had thickened. She adjusted her coat and sat a little taller. Let them watch. She knew what she had done, and she would do it again. Then came the uniform. A voice, deep and firm, cut through the low hum of shoppers. "Ma'am," Elena turned. A mall security officer stood just behind the bench, tall and rigid. His blue uniform looked freshly pressed. His badge gleamed under the artificial lights. And his stance carried a tension that said this wasn't going to be friendly. His eyes scanned her first head to toe before landing briefly on Mason. To him, Elena wasn't a guardian. She was a question, a risk. He didn't greet her. Didn't ask if everything was all right. He just said, "Can you step away from the child, please?" Elena rose slowly, careful not to startle Mason, gently peeling his hand from her sleeve. Her pulse thudded, but her face remained composed. "You're with mall security?" she asked, voice steady. "I am," he said, his expression unreadable. "I'm the one who called," she replied. "He's lost. I found him near the food court." "Step away," he said again, this time firmer. "We need to ensure the child's safety." Before Elena could reply, Mason reached for her. "No." "She helped me." The guard blinked, visibly surprised, just for a moment. "That's fine, kid," he said quickly, brushing it off. "You're safe now." He turned his eyes back to Elena. "Ma'am." She stepped back, just enough, her palms open at her sides. He was crying alone. "I gave him water, stayed with him, and called you right away. You can check my call log." The guard didn't. He raised his radio to his shoulder. "Got the kid. Need confirmation on any missing child report." Elena watched him turn slightly, ignoring her. Her heart wasn't racing from fear, it throbbed. From something deeper, a heavy, familiar ache. Being judged before being heard. Being treated like a problem for doing what others wouldn't. Mason clutched his dinosaur tightly. "My name's Mason," he said softly. "She didn't take me." I was just scared. The silence that followed was dense. The guard didn't apologize. He gave a stiff nod and continued speaking into the radio. Around them, the crowd shifted. Eyes lingered, murmurs spread. The barista from earlier had reappeared at her cafe counter, still watching. The stroller woman was back too, whispering now to someone by the pretzel stand. Elena took a small step forward, not toward Mason, but enough so he could still see her. "I'm staying until his father arrives," she said gently. Mason nodded, visibly comforted by her presence. But Elena could feel it, that invisible line. A gap between her and everyone else in that food court. She had become something for them to explain. Their stares weren't just curious, they were suspicious, then confused, then quiet. Her kindness had been recast as a threat, something unnatural. Still, she stood tall, adjusted her coat, smoothed her expression into calm resolve. Let them look. She knew what she had done. She had stayed. And if life ever gave her the choice again, she would stay every single time. Just as the tension felt unbearable, a shift rippled through the space. It wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. A whisper among whispers. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Phones lifted subtly. Elena followed the crowd's gaze. A man was striding across the corridor toward them, his pace sharp with urgency, his presence immediate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a cream cashmere sweater that clung to his frame, dark tailored jeans, and expensive leather boots. A simple gold watch shimmered at his wrist. His sunglasses reflected the skylights until he pulled them down, revealing eyes that scanned the crowd until they locked on Mason. The murmurs intensified. "That's him, isn't that? Oh my God, is that Jackson Reed?" Elena's breath caught. The name sounded familiar. Tech mogul. Something about a record-breaking IPO just last month. Before she could place it fully, the man reached. Them. Mason. The boy's head snapped up. "Daddy." He launched off the bench and bolted into his father's arms. The man dropped to his knees mid-stride, sweeping the boy into a tight embrace, clutching him like something precious that had almost slipped away. Mason buried his face in his father's neck, tears spilling again, not from fear, but from release. "I was so scared," he mumbled. "I know, buddy," Jackson whispered, eyes closed, his lips pressed to the top of Mason's curls. "I know." Elena stood frozen, hands at her sides, her heart thudding as her own emotions battled within her. Then Jackson looked up. His eyes met hers. There was no confusion in his gaze. No suspicion. Just gratitude and something deeper. Something recognizing. "You stayed with him?" he asked. Elena nodded once. "He was alone. I couldn't walk away." Jackson stood slowly, lifting Mason with one arm. "He gets overwhelmed in crowds." I looked away for half a minute, and he vanished. He studied Elena's face. "Thank you." Before Elena could answer, the security officer stiffened beside her, clearing his throat. "Mr. Reed, sir, I apologize for the delay, Mr. Reed." The confirmation rolled over the crowd like a quiet wave. Elena glanced around. Where judgment once lived, awe had taken its place. Cameras lifted. People whispered. The same eyes that had narrowed at her were now wide with admiration for the man beside her. The guard's tone changed, posture shifting from authority to apology. Jackson adjusted Mason on his hip and turned back to Elena. "Did they treat you with respect?" Elena hesitated. Not out of fear, but because she understood what truth could cost in public. "Not exactly," she said, voice calm but lined with iron, "but that's not why I stayed." Jackson nodded slowly. "You deserve better." Around them, the crowd leaned in. Someone murmured behind her, "She's the one who helped his kid." She could feel it, the shift. It wasn't justice. It was status. Power had entered the scene, and so their perceptions had changed. She had done the right thing, but now it mattered only because someone wealthy said it did. She had lived this dynamic before. "I should have known better," the guard mumbled, eyes averted. "It was just protocol." Jackson's gaze sharpened. Was it? The question hung in the air. No one answered. Jackson turned to Elena. "Again, I don't usually do this in public," he said. "But I'd like to thank you properly." Elena lifted a hand slightly. "That's not necessary." Her instinct was to downplay, deflect. "I was just doing what anyone should have done." Jackson gave her a genuine smile. But not everyone would have. Jackson reached into his coat pocket and brought out a slim, polished business card, its surface smooth like metal glass. He extended it toward Elena with a thoughtful gesture. She accepted it, turning it over to find his name etched cleanly on the back. Jackson Reed, founder and CEO. Solarity Systems. "I'd really value continuing this conversation sometime," he said. Voice low and genuine. "People like you. You make a difference in ways you may never even see." Elena's eyes flicked down to the card again. Her fingers curled around it as though it might slip away if she wasn't careful. It had weight, not just physical, but emotional. Jackson turned. Mason nestled in one arm and strode off through the clearing crowd. Onlookers parted, whispering and glancing between phones and faces. Some recorded, some gasped softly, but Jackson didn't pause. He didn't offer a smile, a nod, a wave. Except once he looked back, briefly, at Elena, a single meaningful nod before disappearing from view. The security guard hovered nearby, his posture awkward, his apology half-formed. Elena didn't give him the satisfaction of a reply. She walked away from the bench, her steps measured. Away from the noise, the stares, the whispers. Her chest lifted with something new, not pride, not validation exactly, but presence. She had been seen. And not because of the man who stood beside her, but because of the quiet choice she'd made when no one was watching. She was almost at the escalator when her name floated through the air. "Elena." She turned, instinctively. Jackson had returned. This time, he was alone. The crowd had dissipated. Mason was safe with staff. The sunglasses were gone, tucked neatly into his collar. His face looked softer, less guarded. And something in his eyes, maybe fatigue, maybe urgency, told her he hadn't come back for ceremony. "I was hoping," he began as he stopped in front of her, "we could have a few moments, just the two of us." Elena tilted her head slightly, her caution still present. "What for?" "Because a handshake in front of strangers doesn't feel like enough," he said. "And because I believe you see things the way most people can't." There was no smoothness in his tone. No performative charm, just something raw and unfiltered. She hesitated. The protective part of her held back, but then slowly she nodded. "All right." They moved together through a quieter hallway, away from the bustling heart of the mall. The glass walls reflected muted colors. The hum of noise faded. Jackson guided her into a subdued lounge tucked behind a private door. Inside, the atmosphere shifted, completely dim lighting, clean lines, the faint aroma of espresso, and soft background music. It felt untouched by the chaos outside. He gestured to a leather couch. Elena sat down, legs crossed, still holding his business card. Jackson remained standing for a moment, as if weighing something. Then he joined her across the coffee table. "In moments like earlier," he said, leaning forward slightly, "most people freeze. They look away, wait for someone else to step in. You didn't." Elena gave a small shrug. Leaving wasn't an option. The boy needed someone. But instead of being thanked, he continued, his voice tight with restraint, "You were treated like you were part of the problem." She let out a short breath through her nose. That reaction isn't unfamiliar. Jackson's eyes darkened. It never should have become normal. A moment passed in silence. The sound of a cup clinking lightly at the espresso station filled the void. Then he spoke again, his tone gentler. "There's something I don't usually talk about." Elena listened, her expression neutral. "I grew up with a woman named Claire," he said. "She took care of me, fed me, taught me how to read, how to speak kindly. My mom was gone a lot. My dad wasn't the nurturing kind. Claire was home." He paused, searching the air like he was watching the memory unfold. "One afternoon in Savannah, when I was 5, she took me to a grocery store. I wandered off. She found me within seconds, but someone had already assumed the worst." Elena's breath slowed. "The police were called. They didn't care that I was crying her name, that I clung to her. They accused her of trying to kidnap me." His jaw tightened. "She was taken away in handcuffs. I was handed to a stranger while she screamed my name. I've never forgotten that sound." Elena folded her arms, not in defense, but in quiet solidarity. She didn't need to ask how it felt. She knew. "She stayed in my life," Jackson continued. "They cleared her. But the damage, what it did to her trust, to how she carried herself after that stayed." He finally met her gaze. "So today, when I saw you sitting with Mason, when I watched how calm you stayed, how strong you stood in the face of that judgment, it brought everything back." Elena's throat tightened, but she kept her expression steady. "All I could think," he said, voice low now, "was how many more women like Claire, like you, are forced to defend their compassion." Elena nodded once, slowly. "It's like time repeats the same story with different names." He nodded. "Exactly. But how you didn't back down, that wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a kind of quiet resistance." Elena exhaled. "I didn't do it to prove anything. I know," he said quickly. "You did it because it was the right thing. And that's what makes it matter even more." She looked away for a second. "I don't want to become someone's symbol. Some moral checkpoint." "You're not," Jackson said. "But maybe you're the reminder people need." A silence hung in the air, thick, thoughtful. The kind that didn't stem from discomfort, but from connection. A weight had shifted. No longer were they strangers exchanging polite words. Now, they were two people whose very different lives had been shaped by the same quiet storm. Jackson finally broke the stillness. He sat up a little straighter, eyes steady. "I run a foundation," he said, the words slow and measured. "It started as something small, mentorship programs, student scholarships, giving communities access to tech tools and training. But it's grown, and we're now expanding. What we need more than anything are leaders. People who lead with principle, with heart, with clarity." Elena lifted an eyebrow. Her voice was even, curious. "Are you offering me a job?" "Not exactly a job," Jackson replied, a corner of his mouth pulling into a slight smile. "I'm inviting you into a conversation, not because of today, but because we need people like you if we're ever going to make real change." She glanced down at the card again, still resting in her hand like it held more weight than its metal frame suggested. It shimmered faintly under the lounge lighting. "I don't think I'm the person you believe I am," she murmured, not out of modesty but realism. Jackson's eyes didn't waver. "I think you're exactly the person the world keeps overlooking. And that's exactly why I'm here, because I see you." She leaned back, absorbing that. It wasn't often someone spoke to her that way, acknowledging her actions without branding them exceptional for her skin, her gender, or her circumstance. This wasn't flattery. It was something deeper. The energy between them softened. Outside, the lounge's glass walls, the mall still buzzed faintly, but in here, it felt distant, muted. Like they were outside the clockwork of normal time, in a space meant only for truth. Then Jackson leaned forward again, his tone shifting. "Let me be more direct," he said. "I want to bring you in, not as an advisor, not as a symbol. As a leader." Elena blinked. "A leader of what?" "One of our new regional hubs. You'd head the office, lead teams, oversee projects, shape policy outreach. It's a full leadership role with support, funding, and the room to build something that lasts. She stared at him for a long moment, her posture still but alert. Her voice, when it came, was low. Is this some kind of guilt offering? A rich man's way of smoothing things over? Jackson met her question without a flicker, not even close. This isn't about guilt. It's about acknowledging what I saw in you today. A child was afraid. You responded with grace, patience, and strength. You handled something most people would have run from. And you did it under pressure, with people doubting you. That isn't ordinary. That's what leadership should look like. Elena crossed her arms slowly. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. I don't accept handouts. And I'm not here to fill a diversity quota. He nodded once. Then we're on the same page. I'm not looking for a checkbox. I'm looking to rewrite what leadership even means. Her gaze dropped to the business card again. Her thumb ran over the etched text. Then she tapped the armrest. Lightly, once, twice, a quiet rhythm of thought. I've spent years building something for myself, she said. I'm cautious with what I commit to. As you should be, Jackson answered. But I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm offering a seat at the table, real influence, not lip service. Her breath hitched just slightly. She didn't show it, but the weight of being offered that kind of respect, it struck deeper than she expected. She lifted her eyes to him again. If I did consider it, she said, I'd need more than a title. I'd want to help rebuild how staff are trained. Not just in leadership, but in bias recognition. Security. Salespeople, bystanders, everyone. People need tools to recognize and change what happened out there today. There was no pause from Jackson. Absolutely. That's not an add-on. That's central. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. And if I say yes, he gave a nod. Then we begin building something that changes lives quietly, powerfully, and for the long haul. There was no crescendo, no one clapped. No spotlight warmed her face, but Elena nodded. A small measured smile appeared. Then I'm in, with one condition. Say it. We don't just fix the effects of the world's bias. We teach people not to create it in the first place. Jackson's smile was different this time. Not wide, not proud, but full of understanding. That's exactly the goal. She extended her hand across the table. He reached out and took it. Their handshake wasn't ceremonial. It was a simple agreement, forged in shared memory and mutual conviction. It didn't need fanfare. It was enough. Because sometimes opportunity doesn't arrive with confetti or acclaim. Sometimes it walks in wearing a coat of compassion. Sometimes it appears when you're simply doing what's right while others look away. Elena hadn't asked for this, but she had stayed when others didn't. And now, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't standing beside someone powerful. She was stepping into her own, and she was ready to lead. In a world quick to judge and slow to understand, be the person who stays. The one who listens. The one who stands up even when it's not easy. Because courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like kindness in the face of suspicion. And if this story moved you, made you pause, or reminded you of the strength we all carry, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay grounded. Stay kind.